So, it's been about 12 hours that we've had to digest the news that The Acolyte is not getting a second season, and we've seen a visceral reaction, as expected, from the online community across the entirety of the opinion spectrum. Everything from claiming that Disney has given into hate and has acquiesced to the toxic elements of the fandom, to that same toxic element saying that this is proof that politics and woke garbage isn't going to fly and they feel vindicated. And I feel like both of those opinions are wrong for different reasons. When you want to look at the reasons why The Acolyte has not been renewed, and again, I want to stress that word, because in my original video last night, I used the word cancelled. And although the end result doesn't change, there is still not going to be a second season of The Acolyte. There is a subtle difference between being cancelled and not being renewed. It looks as though The Acolyte never had firm plans for there to be a second season. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't the potential, that Disney were hoping that it would be a success and they could run a second season, but there was by no means firm plans in place from the get-go, unlike with something like Andor, which came as a packaged 2-season deal. There's a difference between having that packaged 2-season deal and then the rug being pulled out from under you halfway through, and doing a one-off season with the hopes of there being a second one, and then them saying, no, we're going in another direction. Again, end result is the same, but there is a subtle difference in perhaps, the terminology and the way that the decision-making process may come across and the reasonings for not giving the show a second season. So that's really what I want to do, is I want to look at the reasons, because again, I've seen every possible opinion online about why the show was cancelled. Again, I don't want to say cancelled, but not renewed. And so when you look at it, it's really just simple numbers. You have to think about this from the cold, logical perspective of a mega corporation like Disney, who values profit and stock prices over anything else. And if you have a show that has a huge budget that doesn't contribute to your profit margins in a positive way, then it is likely that they're going to ditch it. So when you look at a show like The Acolyte, you see that it has a budget of $180 million. That's $22.5 million per episode. And to put that in perspective, The Mandalorian costs $15 million per episode, as did Kenobi. Some other shows like Andor cost nearly $20 million per episode, but you got 12 episodes out of that. It's just not viable. That's almost $7.5 million per episode more than what is probably the most successful show when we look at viewing figures and critical response in The Mandalorian. $7.5 million per episode. That is a lot of money, even in just one season. And when you look at the viewing figures, which we've been looking at over the last few weeks since the show ended, it certainly did not provide a good enough return for that investment. When you look at the Nielsen ratings, which arguably aren't very reliable because it only gives you the perspective of the United States. It doesn't give you a worldwide viewing figure, but it gives you at least a baseline of trends. And when you look at the trends for the show, 3 out of the 7 weeks that the show was on the air, it was in the top 10 for the Nielsen ratings. 4 of the 7 weeks, it wasn't. That's a big thing for Star Wars. I don't think there's been any other of the live-action shows not be in the Nielsen top 10 ratings in the week that their episode debuted. And that, quite frankly, is very, very concerning. And that is enough to make Disney say, right, maybe we can't afford to give this a second season, because we're spending $22.5 million per episode, and 4 of those episodes haven't even broken the top 10 chart. Now again, we can argue till the cows come home about why the viewing figures weren't there, but that is the simple maths. The viewing figures weren't there. Disney was spending a lot of money on this streaming show, and they weren't getting back what they expected. And that is the cold, hard facts of why The Acolyte is not getting a second season. Now again, I will argue to the end of time that the format is all wrong. This idea that 8 episodes of 40-minute, long stories is not good enough for the Star Wars format. And again, streaming is still in its infancy, as it is right now. Disney Plus has only been around for 5 years. That's a very short time. And you can say that the pandemic maybe has caused a lot of decision making to put shows on Disney Plus rather than revert back to movies, which is what we're seeing going forward now. They are going back to the tried and tested formula of the big screen. And I just think that we are not in a place where streaming is capable of giving us the success that we need for Star Wars. Because when you have to put in $180 million for one single show, for one single season, it's very unlikely you're going to get a return on that. Even with a show like Andor or like The Mandalorian, on its own, it's not going to be enough. Whereas when you look at films, Disney, ever since it took over in 2011, has had vast success with its films. Now, you can look at the one outlier in Solo and say that performed poorly. I think that was down to a poor decision of when to release it right after, I think it was Endgame came out. It was either Endgame or Infinity War. Either way, one of the massive blockbuster Marvel films, and that's obviously going to impact on the box office. If that had come out in December, it probably would have done much better. But people will also say, well, Disney still hasn't recouped the money that, they put into Star Wars, the $4 billion that they used to purchase the IP, all the money that they put into the production of the movies. And that is true to an extent. Every movie, with the exception of Solo, has made a profit, a big profit, but it's still not really caught them up to the investment that they've put in. But it doesn't matter, because as long as those movies continue to make that profit, it will catch up. And Disney will eventually make a profit on its overall investment. And that's the way things were headed up until 2019, when Disney Plus was introduced, and they decided that was the way that they wanted to go. And then the pandemic hit and forced them to continue on that path because cinemas closed. And cinemas have never really recovered. The box office has only just now started to see some of the old figures that we got before the pandemic. Deadpool and Wolverine being an example of one of the first, billion plus movies, along with the other animated show that came out a short while ago, about the emotions. I can't remember. I think it was a Pixar film, but that also was a $1 billion plus film. But there hasn't been too many of those since the pandemic ended. So we're still in that recovery phase for cinemas. And so Disney has stuck to their guns and continued to try to push out these Disney Plus streaming shows, but they're not learning from the mistakes. They're not learning that the fans want more than just 8 short episodes. I'd rather the budget was split. I don't need highly detailed CGI, graphics. I don't need vast sweeping landscapes that are filmed on location. If I can get a good, solid story of a season over 15 episodes, I would take that every day of the week over 8 highly focused, high cost, short stories. That's just my opinion. And I think most people probably share that opinion, because otherwise we'd see the shows getting much higher ratings. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible to do those 8 to 10 episode format seasons and have success. We've seen it with The Witcher, we've seen it with House of the Dragon, we've seen it with The Boys. There's lots of shows that use that format, but they're specifically designed to tell their stories in that way. Whereas Star Wars, it just doesn't feel like it has. It feels like every show has come out with a bit of a confused purpose, not being structured to the medium that it's on. And again, a lot of them feel like movies that have been converted into shows, and very poorly at that. So that's really where we sit. We sit at the fact that the format is not mature enough. The content doesn't seem to have been adapted for that format very well. The costs have spiraled unnecessarily. And again, that says to me that there's a lack of quality control. There's a lack of discipline from the very top. And, you look at the quality of the shows themselves have not been strong enough to garner an audience, to give back an investment on what Disney has put in. Those are the cold, hard facts. It's nothing to do with politics. It's nothing to do with being woke. It's nothing to do with giving in to, the hate mobs online. It's to do with the fact that, unfortunately, there are numerous reasons right now that streaming is just not working out. Quality is definitely going to be an issue in there. But if you don't make the money for Disney, Disney is not going to give you more than they need to. They are going to, pull the rug out from under you. And that's just what's happened here with the Acolyte. Again, not been cancelled. It's just not been renewed. And again, I think that it's probably a justified decision. If I was in charge of Disney right now and I looked at that first season and I saw all that money being pumped into a show that wasn't giving returns, I'd probably say, thanks, but no thanks. I would very much like to see that story continue, maybe in a different format, maybe somewhere down the road. But right now, whilst we're trying to tighten up the books, we're going to try and go in a different direction. And I hope to God Skeleton Crew is better planned out, better formatted, better paced, and utilize their budget better and is received better. I would like for this show to actually be received well online, because again, although that's not the reason why the Acolyte didn't get a second season, it definitely did play a small part, probably in influencing the people at Disney that is it worth it, but it's not the reason. Just like having politics in a Star Wars show isn't the reason why it was cancelled, or isn't the reason why it was bad. So that's it. That's the cold hard facts. And again, I think that until we realise that that's what Disney looks for, we're just going to continue to be disappointed, because you have to look at it from that perspective. If the Skeleton Crew comes out in December and 4 weeks into its run, it's not performing in the viewing figures, probably can expect that show won't get renewed either. That's just the way it is.